Well, I guess that I wanted this video to be... I wanted it to start like a conversation, I think, because I think I come to you. I've got a lot of my thoughts. I talk to you.
No, we'll just be giggling.
I talk to you about all the different thoughts that I have. And my recent one was, the more troublesome your behaviour was, the more likely it was that you got the diagnosis. Any diagnosis, like at the time of the behaviour. If you weren't troublesome, if your behaviour was really good and you learnt to just get on with it, then there was no reason for people to find answers. And I feel like that's something that you and I can relate to.
Right.
I think for me, you know, my behaviour at home was very, very different to how I was in public, and there was such a stark contrast. I lashed out, I had major anger issues at home, and it was because it was my safe space. I felt I had safe people around me, and because of that, it was my mum who did try and find answers, and everywhere else I was the perfect student. I spoke very politely to any adult I came in contact with. Even when I was going to see therapists as early as 6, like, I was still polite, I was still very well behaved. And so I guess this is kind of the concept that I feel it might anger people, like it might anger them learning this about themselves, because it's like, you did this, you developed this mask of being a good, quiet daughter, son, whatever, student, and in some ways it helped you to survive, but in other ways it withheld you from learning who you truly were. And so it can be quite infuriating for people to learn that, because regardless of how you look at it, there's still a loss. That can be infuriating for people to learn, and this was just a concept that came to me of, if you allowed and if you were everything that you were feeling and experiencing outwardly, then it probably meant that you the louder you were, the more people listened. And if you weren't, like you and I typically aren't, you go undiagnosed.
The sky looks really cute.
As we're driving
Yeah.
over these pretty homes.
Hi.
I think if you are subscribed to my channel, then you definitely understand that the big premise of my channel is for people who have gone undiagnosed. And, you know, I spend a lot of my time thinking about why this happens for so many people, and why this is such a big thing at the moment, where people have gone so many years of their lives and only now are people starting to kind of find acceptance and an explanation for the way that they lived their life. I guess they're able to explain away some of the issues that occurred in their childhood. If you relate to me, then I am sure that you could definitely relate to the outdated autism stereotypes having a massive negative impact on your life. This concept that I kind of introduced at the beginning of this video, how externalized your behavior was and how much that impacted other people, probably contributed to the diagnosis or the lack of a diagnosis. Only now are we realizing that the look of a straight white male who is having big temper tantrums, who may be non-verbal, who's really into trains and is very, very mathematical and logical thinking. This look of autism definitely is, there are people out there. There is a reason why this is a stereotype. It does exist. But what people are now starting to come around to is that autism doesn't have just one look. Autism doesn't always look like what people will expect. The problem with this autism stereotype is that the diagnostic criteria in order to get this outdated autism diagnosis, it more so focuses on externalized behavior rather than the internalized behavior, the internal struggles, which in some ways kind of defeats the purpose. You know, in my video last week, I introduced the concept of the sunflower lanyard for travel and how it has helped me so much. You know, the entire label on the sunflower lanyard says hidden disabilities. This is what I want to basically make people aware of, is autism can be obviously very external. There can be behaviors that can be very externalized, but for a lot of us, a lot of people who relate to me, it is an internal experience, internal struggle. I now want to introduce to you guys a bit of a concept that I just want to preface with saying that some of you who do relate to this may feel a sense of mourning, a sense of anger, a sense of grief, sadness, all those things when I kind of talk about this, because I know for so many of my viewers, you know, I get so many incredible comments of people talking about like how they're in their 50s, anywhere from like 50s to 70s, you know, on a weekly basis. I get like a comment from this age group, which I love. My parents' ages are between those ages, and it is just so impactful to my life to know that I am talking to people, to an age group that I look up to so much. I just want to be mindful that what I am saying can cause those emotions, and just to remind you to notice them. You don't have to personalize the emotions or find fault in having these emotions. I just want you to be aware that they may come up and just let them kind of pass. This is quite a big thing I'm doing currently in my life, is noticing, watching kind of what emotions come up for me, and I thought I would start with that. I think for so many autistic people, their childhoods consisted of being extremely confused, probably reprimanded a lot for their behavior, seen to be the problem child, the problem sibling, the problem student, noticing that their parents' behavior or their caregivers' behavior was kind of very irritable because of them, because of the child, or that's how it appeared on the surface. And so I think over time what can happen, the child can develop the good kid mask. And maybe it doesn't even take those things. Maybe they just were naturally born into just being naturally aware of people, silently sitting back and seeing the outcome of behaving good and behaving bad and what that could result in. The problem with this good kid, this perfect kid mask, is that so often the internal battles of the child are forgotten, because most likely the child did not actually vocalize that anything was ever wrong. They might have learnt to not ever have things wrong. And so this is when you see, you know, children that become amazing students, or in whatever hobbies, extracurriculum activities they do, they become incredible. They become the best, because that is when they get the acknowledgement, and that is somewhat kind of like having their needs met. The problem that also comes with that is the pressure in order to perform correctly, to get the feedback, to get the reassurance, but also to avoid criticism. So then what can happen is, as the child gets older, and naturally a part of life is getting things wrong, making mistakes can feel like the end of the world. Getting something wrong, whether that be in a conversation, whether that be at school, whether that be just a bad day, the rejection or the perceived change in reaction from the parent, from the teacher, from the friends feels so incredibly heavy. And so I think a natural byproduct of this is things can become really numb feeling. Not only this, but I wonder how many of you guys can relate to being praised as a child for seeming so mature or being so quiet and well behaved. A lot of us, including myself, were referred to as extremely well behaved and so shy and conscientious. My mum was like, what the hell? Because who you are at home is so very much different. Masking versus meltdowns. When I created this title, it sounds like one, meltdowns is very externalized and masking is very internalized. And I can also say that meltdowns can also be an internalized experience. I talk a lot about that on my social media. If you guys are interested in seeing more of my content, I always link my social medias down below. No pressure to follow, but there is, that option to see my content in written form. The day that I got my diagnosis, I was told from the psychologist who was diagnosing me that I was an extremely good masker, that I had it down packed. The average person would not be able to tell. And I really do believe that this was something that I mirrored from my family members. For those of you who don't know me, I should have said this at the beginning, but my name is Elena and I was diagnosed with autism at age 25. But I actually come from a family who have a lot of autism within the family. We now realize this, but I think originally where it has stemmed from would be my grandmother. She was a very staunch lady in her approach, but I think this staunchness, this way of her attitude actually got her through her life. If ever there was something wrong with her physically, it never happened in the public. It never happened publicly. And it was such an interesting thing because at the time of her death, she was in hospital for, I think it was a few weeks, and she was doing okay. There wasn't kind of talk initially that she wasn't going to not get out of hospital, but she had kind of been going through some health stuff, and the doctors ended up telling her that she would not be able to return back to living on her own as she had previously done before she had entered into the hospital. She was going to either have to have someone live in the home with her, or she was going to have to go into a home because of the care that she needed. And this woman was so incredibly self-reliant and always kind of pushed the message to her children, my mother was her child, that you don't rely on anybody, that you yourself can get yourself through anything. And so this staunchness really, I believe, was the reason she ended up dying. And I believe she chose it. After finding that out, she was so annoyed by it, so angered by it, that suddenly her symptoms and her body started to deteriorate, and suddenly the family are all called in and she passes away. And from the beginning of her stay in the hospital to the end, it was just like, how did this happen so quickly? And so where I'm going with this is I come from a family who I think definitely taught me that if you're going through something, if you are losing the plot and need to express yourself in a big way, you do that at home, or you do that in a safe space. And so I definitely learnt to not have public meltdowns. I've never had a public meltdown. I know for so many of us, especially women, masking in the public eye, especially masking a meltdown or having an internalized meltdown, is the safer route publicly. But there it is again, and the point of this video that I am trying to make is, if the meltdowns were internalized and the masking front was there, again, not only can this lead to burnout and anxiety, but no doubt the diagnosis came at a very later time, if ever, because your behavior did not impact anyone. I wrote this next part down and I wanted to read it word for word. The impact of a late diagnosis is you're having to undo years of the perfect child mask. You began this mask to avoid rejection, so learning that this mask prevented the diagnosis can be confusing. In some ways it kept you safe, and in other ways it prevented you from knowing who you really are. This is why I prefaced earlier that there can be a sense of mourning, a sense of anger, a sense of sadness, overall just a very heavy emotion can exist. You can know as your adult self that you did the best you could as a child, and the strategies that you put in place unconsciously were there to help you get by in this life. As you get older, these strategies may have continued into your teenage years, well into adulthood, and then into your later years for some of us. So there can be this mourning, because it's like that behavior, those coping mechanisms, can be the very reason why you didn't get diagnosed. When I got my diagnosis, the psychologist actually told me that, this was day one of the rest of my life, and that I was going to basically be going over my life again, taking off the rose-colored glasses in a way, and actually now getting the map to the road that I've been trying to figure out for 25 years. And it really is so true. The journey to a diagnosis can be very long and winding, but I think the journey also begins, another different kind of journey begins when we have those answers, because then you are battling, going over your life, but finding acceptance of yourself, and you're finally getting answers to questions as to why you made certain decisions as a child, as a teenager, as an early adult. So I guess I want to end this video by saying, just give yourself a bit of acceptance and a bit of grace, because it is a long, long road. I am consistently amazed by how far I've come. So this year will be 4 years since I've had my answers, and every single month I feel I'm learning something new, particularly by vocalizing all my findings and thoughts and things with you guys here on the internet. So this video really just is a message of acceptance and just feel amazement for yourself, I guess, that you were doing the best you could, and these were the strategies that you came up with. And how amazing is that you just knew what to do in order to get by, and it all happened subconsciously. You really are looking out for yourself, particularly if you've made it to the end of this video. You are trying to find those answers. You are trying to find and listen to people who also understand. So really, this is an acknowledgement to you as the viewer, and I just want to end on a positive, because I know that this can be quite a heavy topic for a lot of my viewers. Again, if you guys want more support, I put all my social medias down below. As I said, thank you so much for listening to me. I love you guys so very, very much, and I'll talk to you very soon. Bye.